Okay, and I'd like to, as we get into our final segment here, I want to once again thank L3 Harris for their very generous support of the event. And with that, I'd like to welcome up Kristen Houston, President of Space Propulsion and Power Systems at L3 Harris. Kristen.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this great symposium. Thanks, Jim, for all your great efforts, you and the entire team to put this together. The Aerojet Rocketdyne team at L3 Harris is very excited to again be a sponsor of the Von Braun Symposium, and it's a gathering that just continues to bring human exploration community together. So today I have the honor to introduce two distinguished leaders in space exploration who I'm sure are familiar faces to most of you here in the audience. So joining us to facilitate today's discussion is Wayne Hale, a former NASA engineer and Space Shuttle Program Manager who retired in 2010 as the Deputy Associate Administrator of Strategic Partnerships at NASA headquarters. Wayne played a key role in the Space Shuttle program, and his contributions to NASA and ensuring the safety and success of numerous shuttle missions are widely recognized. After retiring from NASA, he has continued to share his knowledge and experience through various speaking engagements, consulting roles, contributions to the NASA Advisory Council, and educational outreach efforts. His insights into leadership, risk management, and team dynamics are highly valued within the aerospace community. So please join me in welcoming Wayne Hale. Next, I'd like to introduce NASA Associate Administrator Jim Free. Jim's dedication to pushing the boundaries of space exploration is evident through his impressive tenure at NASA, which includes roles at Goddard Space Flight Center, Johnson Space Center, and Glenn Research Center, including a stint as a center director at NASA Glenn. So those of you that know Glenn, or those of you who know Jim, understands that his heart lies in Ohio, leading to some of the time at Glenn. I recently oversaw a part of L3 Harris that's located in Mason, Ohio, that's now down near Cincinnati, and that business provides avionics and communications for space products, including Artemis. And also part of my family resides down in that area. So I also share a fondness for Ohio, and particularly for Grater's ice cream. I'm sure you're a fan. Though I do say, I know there's a Big Spoon Creamery here trying to give a run for the money, but I will still say I will vote for Grater's. But much like the best ice cream, under Jim's leadership, we are doing things that are both cool and uplifting. We are laying the foundation for something truly amazing with the world's most capable rocket and the only deep space human-rated spacecraft. We are returning humans to the moon and aiming to take humans farther into the solar system than ever before. Jim is a man helping us make that happen. So please join me in welcoming NASA Associate Administrator Jim Free to the stage. Thanks.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for the introductions. And
can I say before we start,
wow, already he's interrupted.
I'm a fan of the Cleveland Guardians, and they should have been in the World Series, I'm just saying.
Too soon, Wayne, too soon. No, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed your lunch or enjoying your lunch. I understand pick both desserts, don't just pick one. And then there's a cookie, too, which I didn't know about, so you have a choice of three. What a great honor it is to be here with Wayne. Those of you that know Wayne, a true leader. I saved this for when Wayne got up here, Wayne. I actually pointed my kids to your blog this past year around the anniversary of Columbia. And if those of you that have not read it, truly great leadership, but a great reflection on human spaceflight and the costs and what we need to do better on always. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of discussion here today. Everybody's coming by like setting the bar very high for our discussion here, so a lot to live up to. But please start thinking of questions. Wayne and I would definitely prefer to interact with you than each other, so seeing if everybody's awake. But great, Wayne's rich history in Space Shuttle, ISS, and just his leadership philosophy. So let me start with a question. Being outside of NASA, I guess since 2010, but in your recent purely retired role, how have you seen things change in that time and since 2010 and just in the last year as well?
That's really there's a lot of ways I could go with this question. I think one of the things, and by the way, I spent 12 years working for Special Aerospace Services, which is an engineering and contracting consulting firm. So I interacted with a number of the large and small aerospace firms from the industry side. So I got to see both sides, from the government and then behind the curtain how industry really does business. And so that's been a revelation. But what the biggest thing I think that has changed since I was leading the space shuttle program, for example, is the nature of the relationship with the industry partners. During the space shuttle program and all the other earlier human spaceflight programs, we operated on a cost plus award fee contract basis. And so if you wanted something as program manager, I want to paint the shuttle blue this week, or something like that, the contractor would smartly salute and go out and buy the paint and do the work and then send the bill to the government. And it was all done, fairly above board, but there wasn't a lot of discussion or pushback. Nowadays, it is much more popular. I wouldn't say it's prevalent, but more frequently done, that there are firm fixed fee service award contracts. And there's some benefits to each one, but I do know from my experience working with some folks when they did bids, they were trying to come out with the lowest cost proposal, of course. And so they would take a look at the requirements and they would say, how do you think those are going to be interpreted? And they would always try to pick a favorable interpretation from their point of view to make the price as low as they could make it to the bid. And then when the contract's let and there's interaction between the various parts of the government and the contractor, sometimes those interpretations got changed. And then there wasn't a lot of wiggle room in a firm fixed price contract. So I think what I see is a struggle to accomplish, because we all know that NASA doesn't really build hardware. I mean, okay, some prototype stuff, but in the larger sense, NASA contracts out for all the hardware to carry out these very complex missions and expects the contractor or the provider, the vendor, the industry partner to provide the highest quality equipment to meet the specifications. And so there's this tug back and forth how to do that within the framework. So I see that as, this doesn't sound very exciting. We could talk about, rocket thrust and turbo pumps or something, but in the world of making headway in space, relationships between the government and those that actually build the hardware are vital. And that's something I still see folks trying to find their right path through the woods there. So you get to talk a lot about contract and contract mechanisms.
Now it's getting exciting. Yeah.
We're taking bets on how soon people would start falling asleep. So not to preempt it, but I would say, how does NASA management help the contractors, help the providers meet those cost, schedule, and technical performance marks in this very challenging and ambitious program that NASA's laid out?
I think some of it is how we set up the programs. A lot of times we were just at Johnson yesterday, and Pam was laying this out. Like, hey, sometimes we jump into a contract, like let's throw $170 million at it, and we'll just get going, and we'll figure out the requirements later. We need to do a better job on the front end of setting the requirements, whatever the contract type. They have different implications if it's a fixed price contract versus cost plus, obviously, but setting those requirements up front and getting the right contract in place. And then how we run it. I'll leave the names out of this, but somebody's like, hey, what's NASA going to do about this article that came out? And I was like, hey, what are we going to do together with industry? I'm happy to front a lot of things and take the heat, but we are partners in this. There's a collaborative side of this that we need to work together on, and that's telling our story, and that's executing, and that's performing. And we have all got to perform if we want to get these great achievements done and get them done on the milestone that we can. And how do we encourage that? The payments on the contract. Award fee scores, never a popular thing to say, hey, award fee, if it's a cost plus, is going to be, I won't give a number because that'll frustrate some people, but certainly it gets below there's some threshold, which I wish I had achieved academically because I would have been great, but in award fee, that's not so great. And then milestone payments. On fixed price contracts, how do we barter? I was fortunate to work on a fixed price contract where it was all about bartering. We made one contract change in I think 8 years, and it was fixed price. And it was a NASA directed study, by the way, that we changed. Everything else was a barter. How do we work together to maybe drop one requirement, pick up another one? Because we're going to learn as we go along. So I think it's setting it up front, that collaboration, and living by what we've all signed to as a contract on both sides of that equation. So Wayne, 30 years plus, and you've seen NASA change. You just talked some about that. How has leadership in the aerospace industry changed with your expertise and as a leader, and as you've shared in the blogs and in many talks? How have you seen that change as well?
So it was interesting. When I went to work back in the dark ages, before the first shuttle mission, management largely was of the greatest generation. You know what I mean? Grew up during the Great Depression, served in World War II or maybe Korea, and they did not suffer fools gladly. We were held to a very high standard of accountability in our work, and if you did not perform at a very high level, you were publicly castigated. I mean, I said in some eye-watering sessions that the human resources people today would not allow to have happen. Those of you that are laughing nervously know what I'm talking about. It was quite a different environment, and I think today things have evolved, and certainly as we talk about the management of young people, new college grads, younger people coming out, to encourage them to succeed, you have to use different techniques. If you tell them that they, are lower than the bottom of the ocean, then they might just walk out the door, and there's other jobs, right? There's other things to do. So we've seen an evolution in management, and I think it's been to the good side. I could name names, but I won't. But certainly that has been a huge change in NASA management. I think the thing that's remained constant in the whole aerospace industry is this pressure to perform really audacious things on a budget and a very grueling schedule. That remains the same. There was a study that came out recently that said that NASA's got too much to do for the resources that it's been given, right? And I thought to myself, when I saw this study, I said, that's not news. They said the same thing 10 years ago. They said the same thing 20 years ago. They said the same thing 50 years ago. NASA, in this community, always has more audacious things that they want to do than the resources would seem possible to do it in. I think if you went back to the glory days of Apollo, when NASA got almost 5% of the national budget, there were probably leaders there that said, we've got more to do than we've got money to do it with, right? There's always that challenge. So how do you deliver this high risk, high performance, high technological achievement within the constraints of the budget and the schedule that you've got? That's an ongoing challenge, and that has not changed. And I don't see it changing in the near future either. I wish I could tell you Congress next year is going to offer you more money than you know what to do with, but I think we all know that that's unlikely. But the mission out there is the same. The Moon to Mars program, Lakeisha, thank you for all your hard work. Your people's hard work on that is really a benefit to the nation, benefit to humanity, and something that we need to pursue. And so using the very best techniques to organize and motivate people is something that evolves as time goes on.
Thanks, Wayne.
I'm supposed to ask you something here. So you were AA for exploration while the Moon to Mars and Artemis goals were developed, and now you're the associate administrator over the whole agency. So you know that the schedule, in particular, will depend on the resources that you're given, right? But in addition to that, the schedules also take some issues when there are technical problems that have to be overcome. And, I don't want to make a laundry list, but we can talk about, heat shield issues, thruster issues, valve issues. I mean, there's always technical issues, parachute issues. There are always things that go along. So the question that I have for you is, how do you, as the associate administrator for the agency, work with your program managers, your associate administrators for the different directorates, to help them find a path through these technical difficulties to achieve the goals within the cost and scheduled timeline?
Yeah, I think it's probably more a study in leadership than anything else. These are very smart people that they've been asked to take on these jobs, and I had the pleasure of speaking with students. Some of them are here in the room earlier, and I was like, I try and say it all the time. I think my job is to take things out of the way of the people that are doing the real work, and that's the program managers. That's folks like Ahmed and Lakeisha and Steve Creech and Kathy Kerner and Nikki Fox that have things thrown in their way that distract them from working on valves, which, by the way, I told my two engineering sons, like, learn how to make a valve, you will be rich forever. And I said, if you need a consultant in a few years, I know a good guy that can help you out. But we need to take barriers out of the way. And the barriers might be, hey, I don't know, something institutionally that we're not supporting them with. Like, they might need more procurement help. Our procurement folks are very taxed right now. They might need some other ideas that another mission directorate might be able to help them with a particular technical issue or a contract type that they've found a way to solve. So I think, number one, my job is to let them do their work and help where I can, but also understand. I think, and I want to have a question for you on this in a second, but understand the issue, understand the difficulty, so that we can communicate that externally. We're going to have technical challenges. Going to the moon is hard. Otherwise, if it were easy, everybody would be there. Going to the South Pole is even more difficult. And we talk about going on to Mars. We're buying some of that risk down right now, but boy, that is really hard too. So we need to be able to communicate why it's hard just in general. Then what are the things that administratively are getting in the way? What are the budget challenges that we have? Some things, sometimes it's hard to start and stop programs. We get fixed at a funding level in a continuing resolution. That makes the contract change. That stretches things out. In addition to things we could be doing to manage better as well. So try and just be able to paint the whole picture, be able to tell it, and help them where they need help. But they're incredibly smart and capable people, and probably would appreciate me getting out of the way more. So to the question of talking about complexity, Wayne, and the phrase space is hard, how do we communicate in your mind you've seen many problems in our industry, as you said, from both inside the government and outside. What's the best way we can communicate that complexity, that difficulty of what we're trying to do?
It depends on who you're communicating to. So there's different stakeholders. There's the general public, right? There's Congress and congressional staffers that are responsible for providing the appropriations to do the job. They're industry partners. There's all kinds of different audiences. And I think part of our problem in this community is that if you turn on TV, you watch a movie, going into space is kind of in the background. They have a story to tell, and look, the astronauts lifted off from Mars. Look how easy that was. It looks so easy in the fiction world, right? And so people come back and say, well, why isn't it that easy in the real world? And we know that it's because we don't possess the kind of technology that makes it easy. It is very difficult. I did a calculation, I have to confess, my technical intern did a calculation one year for me that compared the amount of energy needed to get an airliner to, cruise state 30,000 feet, 500 miles an hour, versus the amount of energy that it takes to get into low Earth orbit, about 100 nautical miles, 17,500 miles an hour. And if you go through that, high school physics calculation, it's like 1,000 times the amount of energy to fly the airplane is to get to orbit about in an order of magnitude, 1,000 times. So it's 1,000 times harder. And yet when I go to the airport, sometimes my plane breaks, sometimes the flights are running late, sometimes, there's all kinds of things that happen. And I think what we're trying to do just to get to low Earth orbit is 1,000 times harder. And I would suggest if you did the same kind of mental calculation to go to the moon or to Mars, then it's probably 1,000 times more difficult to do those things. And communicating that to the general public is hard because most of the general public isn't in tune with physics. They're not engineers, bless their hearts. And
That was
my
Wayne
neighbors,
Hale.
My neighbors, and my neighbors say, well, why should we spend all this money to go to the moon or go to Mars? And that takes a longer conversation. This isn't a 140 character, social media post or a sound bite. It takes a longer conversation. I think it's worthwhile for the future of humanity. It's certainly worthwhile for our nation. But you got to communicate it. It's very hard, and it's really at the very limit of what we can do today technologically. And it carries risk, and we have to have a discussion about risk in some form or another. So communication, good luck. Yeah.
What do you think about taking some questions?
Yes, I think we could take some audience questions.
Please.
We'll try to get a mic out to you.
I can actually project.
Please do.
I'm Parker Wishick. I'm in communications at the Aerospace Corporation. Thanks for talking about communications. And it is a challenging conversation sometimes to talk with the general public about why do we invest 1% of the federal budget in NASA? Never mind 5%. One of the things that we look at is connecting them to the concept of the value of space. What do you think we could be doing better as an industry to talk about all the benefits the general public society gets from all of the great things that this group and others are doing in space? Thanks.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. And by the way, it's less than 1%, not 1%. I'd love 1%. That'd be great. I think I'll give an example. We just released our economic impact report. $25 billion, and NASA comes back as $75 billion, right? 300,000 plus jobs, depending on region. You can look at, that's overall, you can look at that regionally. To me, that's number one. You try and, Wayne's point about connections, your point about connections, try and come up with data for each group that you're gonna talk to. To me, that's one. I'm not a finance person, but somewhere a finance person and economist would love that. I would guess an economic development organization would love that kind of data. We integrated that a couple years ago. I don't remember when, Casey, but a couple years ago, every center used to do their own. Now it's integrated as one with breakouts for each center. I think that's an important way to do it. The next way for me is kind of the awe and wonder. I think everyone in this room has awe and wonder at some of the stuff we do, some aspect, maybe all of it, some may be more interesting. Just going out and seeing the space station fly over, planting an idea in people's head of what is happening in space and has been happening continuously for 20 plus years. I don't know, there's a kernel in there that people can pick up on. The Europa Clipper mission, if I take it out of human space flight, something the size of our moon has twice the water on Earth and has I'm going to say it wrong, hopefully there's no SMD people, the conditions for life like we see in the depths of our ocean. You show some of those pictures, some JWST pictures, that just finding the neural connections that identify for other people, or whatever technology is in your iPhone that came from NASA research, or you fly safe every day because of NASA technology in aircraft. Trying to find, I think it's a multifaceted land, and you got to figure out which audience and how you're going to communicate with. Wayne, I think, said some of that too.
So I have a friend, and we were talking the other day, and he says, I don't get space, I don't need space, I don't need what goes on in space, just give me a good weather forecast and my GPS on the phone, and I'm good. And it's like, what are we talking about? Okay, yeah, it's I think to amplify a bit on what Jim said, one of the things about the planetary exploration is the study of other worlds, and when we can compare the atmosphere and climatology of Mars, and the atmosphere and climatology of Venus, the atmosphere and climatology of Earth, how do you think we're going to understand ourselves better if we don't have these comparisons and we can say these are constants across all planets with atmospheres, but here are specific things that happen when you don't have an ocean, or when you do have an ocean, or when you have runaway greenhouse gas, greenhouse warming from too much carbon dioxide. Those kinds of insights will help us solve our problems here on Earth by having gone to the planets and understand what's going on out there. So, pure science is extremely important to the advancement of mankind.
I hope that person is not your friend anymore, by the way.
He is after I educated him.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Joaquin Castro, Origin Rocketdyne L3H. Just not to belabor the point, but to follow the thread. I've been told that NASA is not allowed to promote themselves because of Congress. But it's so simple to get the point across that pretty much every aspect of our life is pervasively impacted positively by the science and the capabilities derived from space and defense. Why can't NASA do a better job, Jim, going out there and educating the average Joe as to how good their life is because of the things that we do in space? In here, we're all space geeks, right? We all get it. But the average Joe out there doesn't get it, or Jane. I don't want to be sexist, but why can't we go out there and do a better job educating folks? I think that will go a long way in helping us in public perception.
So I would say we have an incredible communications effort, but that doesn't mean we can't do better. But I will say the tools we use and the people that come up with our comms tools are truly incredible. I would encourage it. We were talking about, again, outside of human spaceflight, the products for Europa Clipper were absolutely riveting. And they make these products, when combined with our education folks, from kindergarten through college to kind of our greatest stakeholder, that's the taxpayer. I don't remember how much our comms budget is, but I think we have a very concerted effort at comms. We're always open to feedback. Now, we are one bit of this. So in my opening, or one at the beginning, I said, it takes all of us to tell that story too. You all contribute from an Aerojet Rocketdyne perspective, L3 Harris now combined. You all contribute to these missions too, and sometimes it can go beyond a press release. Your comms teams talk with our comms teams. How can you be part of telling the story to people that we don't necessarily have access to, the people that live in the communities where your factories are? So I think we can team better together. I believe we have a great effort, but I will tell you, I will take feedback all the time on how we're doing programmatically, how we're doing telling our story. But man, I see the products that go out, and let's make them better if you have thoughts.
So let me just say that being the old guy on the stage here, Jim's just a youngster. He probably doesn't know, but I grew up with Apollo. It was going on while I was in high school, and if you read the studies, never did the public approval of the Apollo program to go to the moon exceed 50% of the people. It was never a popular, in the sense that you might think of popular program, but we committed, we don't want to go into history all that, but the decision makers in the country understood why it was important. And so while I would dearly love to have the man on the street, 95% of them say, yeah, space is great and we need to do more in space, and we certainly should keep educating them. It's really important to educate the decision makers, the people that will allocate the resources to do these great things. And I think one of the things that private industry can do that NASA can't do is lobby Congress. So NASA can talk about your achievements, and they do through the comms people. And that's all, or what their plans are, and that's all well and good. But again, if you want to go to where the rubber meets the road, go to your industry days on the Hill with your corporate people, which I've done over the past decade, and that's really, really important too. And that's something NASA, as a government agency, can't do.
Right.
Anyone else? Raise your hand high if you have another question.
I will call somebody out. I told somebody before this, I will call them out for a question. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. Faith.
Oh, we got.
Faith was a student in the talk that I gave, and just great questions by the students. By the way, I will tell you, the students asked questions for like 45 minutes, and all of you are a little shy with only 2 so far. So I'm going to put Faith on the spot here, and.
All right. Well, thanks for calling me out. Appreciate it. Let me think. I really liked what you guys have had to say about kind of the past and also the future. But I think what I would love to hear more about from y'all is kind of the now. What are we doing well, and what do we need to keep doing? Not necessarily the things we have to improve all the time. Like, what should we stick with, and what can we kind of encourage to stay the same? Because change is good, of course, but I feel like we should also recognize that there have been some really amazing efforts from a lot of really cool, amazing engineers and scientists in the room. And I just want to recognize what we're doing well and keep that.
Yeah, I'll start. Certainly, Wayne, I'm sure, has some ideas. Thank you, Faith. Thanks for indulging me and putting me on the spot. We are our own worst critics, so we will dwell in the negative a lot. And I appreciate your question for that reason, but also to highlight what the award that Lakeisha accepted. What we did on Artemis 1 is really incredible. What we had over the last administration change, I had a discussion with Casey Swales yesterday. Casey's our agency transition lead yesterday or the day before, and I had a cold sweat like, oh my gosh, we're a week away. We need that consistency and purpose. That has not happened since Apollo. As soon as we go do something else, like, hey, let's go to another destination. I'm not even going to say anywhere else, but that just takes all our programs back years. We need to stick with the plan that we have now. That doesn't mean we can't perform better. That doesn't mean we need to just accept the state of the art of our contracts or of our technology, but we need to keep this destination of the moon from a human spaceflight perspective. If we lose that, I believe we will fall apart and we will wander, and other people in this world will pass us by.
So when I got out of graduate school and got my job opportunity to go work at NASA and started my career there, it was before the first shuttle flight. And I thought, wow, man, we will, do this shuttle thing for a couple of years, and then we'll build, von Braun's version of the International or Space Station, which will be the taking off place to go to assemble the vehicles that'll go to the moon and onto Mars and so forth. And by the time I retire, we'll have this great legacy of solar system exploration behind me. Didn't really work out that way, right? It's good to be optimistic and have good goals. And I really hope that we get to the moon and land on Mars before I'm in the home, Lucretia. We need to set that goal. But some of the things we're doing well today that we need to keep doing is low Earth orbit. So we have the International Space Station there, and I know nothing lasts forever, but we can't abandon low Earth orbit. We really can't. Continuous human presence in space has been going on since 1999. October 31st, we launched the first crew, Shep and Yuri, to the International Space Station on October 31st. So think about that tomorrow. And continuously there have been people in space, and we need to keep that going. And so building follow-on space stations or whatever you might have to continue to exploit the resources that are in low Earth orbit is exceedingly important, and that's a good thing. And I think you ought to take your hat off and salute the folks that are sitting in the ISS mission control 24/7, 365, and the crews that are up there for 6, 7, 8 months at a pop of what they're doing. And there's great work that we can continue to do that will help enable us to go to Mars, particularly in the human research program. So we need to keep doing that, and that's being done very well, and we need to continue that. And at the same time, this excellence that you see at the Marshall Space Flight Center, at the Johnson Space Flight Center, at the Kennedy Space Center, and other centers that are building these new vehicles and have these great plans to go on, we need to continue that. I'm 100% with Jim. I've seen programs get canceled, and I know what disarray that brings to the whole program, to the whole, and when I say program, I mean the bigger program of extending human presence into the universe. We can't stop and start. We've got to stay the course and continue to develop the vehicles and the programs that we've got going on.
Thanks, Wayne. Other thoughts? Please go ahead.
Got just to get you guys. Are you sure it's on? Okay, great. So I actually would like kind of a historical comment on a couple things. So in my 35-year career, I have seen the balance of emphasis from headquarters to centers to headquarters to centers. And while, being in a program office, clearly more autonomy and control is always welcomed. Having said that, I see the need, and actually have said openly many times that Moon to Mars is a good thing and has helped us tremendously with integration. I will also say, period, and I think it's important for us to watch the size of headquarters, because the pendulum, speaking of change of what we were talking through. So just maybe comment on centralization of decision making at headquarters versus delivering of some of the autonomy at the programs. And so pulling on that, clearly in the human landing system, we have fixed price contracts with 2 different providers. And we often, as you mentioned earlier, Jim, on some of your experience, we use the ledger ability, meaning, okay, if you do this for us, we can help you here, we can help you here. And when there is a lot of folks very interested in helping you do that, it's sometimes results in good things, and sometimes it results in okay things that maybe take a long time. So just a comment of over the years of the centralization and where you think we are now. Are we the right size? Are we the right balance? And where do you see us going in the future?
You want me to start with this? Yeah, please. Okay. So when I was the Space Shuttle program manager, and the guys at headquarters were driving me absolutely crazy, you know. And I'm sure nobody else has had this, but they were driving me crazy. We were at church one day and got out of the service, and there were a gaggle of the NASA retirees, people that had been in leadership positions but were retired now, standing around in the narthex of the church. I think they were talking about where to go fishing or something important like that. And I walked up to them and I said, "How did you guys deal with headquarters when you were, trying to run things?" And they laughed. And then one of them looked at me, he says, "The thing you got to remember about headquarters is they won't be there very long." So I would tell you, Lisa, and everybody here, the pendulum is going to go back and forth. The pendulum is going to go back and forth. There is no optimum solution that I've ever seen. There's only the solution that's being worked by the team that's together right now. And so, having been a program manager, I am completely in your camp. Decision making should be driven down as low as possible. I think in the technical arena, it's been my observation, and this is in years past. You got a much smarter team now, of course, but in years past, headquarters was particularly unprepared to make technical decisions. Now, policy, yes. Resources, yes. But again, I would expect that the size, the control will change from time to time. I certainly saw it change in my 32 years in the government service.
Yeah, I would just add, Lisa, I think we are so fortunate to have the leadership that we have in ESDMD now with Kathy and Amit and Lakeisha and Steve and the program managers. I can't imagine not having the leadership, I'll say, above the programs and some of the SE&I functions with some of the trades and decisions that have to be made across these missions. I don't know how we could do that program to program. It does absolutely have to be right-sized. I agree with you. But some of those decisions that Amit and all of you have been taking on, I think have to be done at the integrated level. Because you get into technical issues, that's going to drive trades and missions, right? Do we need to fly missions differently? We need to consider that. That's the level of where it's got to be done at. And, the direction for Moon to Mars program actually came in the NASA authorization. Now, we talked a lot about that, how we implement it. We went back and forth with OMB and Congress and the leadership of the agency, first and foremost, when I was in my previous role, and tried to make it so that it wasn't this behemoth over there of smart headquarters people. And the center directors had a lot of pushback, like, "Oh man, we could take in all these," and I was like, "Guess what? I don't know the percentage, Lakeisha, so you can speak up if I'm wrong, but it's a very small percentage that actually sit at headquarters, and I mean everybody else is at the centers with the teams doing the work. But that top level of trades, I think the only way we do that is but we have to watch that it doesn't get too big. I agree with
I think it also puts a great responsibility on the centers, Joseph, to provide the leadership training for the people at the center so that they can carry out those difficult decisions. So, it's a two-way street.
And we owe that to the center directors, especially now that the program managers report to headquarters, in this case, report to Amit. The training and equipping of the teams that support those program managers are on the center directors, and we have to support them in that development and work that relationship too. Thanks, Lisa.
Somebody ask a hard question, will you?
Right here.
Hey, so I'm a student here at UAH, and I'm part of our liquids team, and I do like technical leadership on one of our subsystems. So I know you guys obviously have probably done leadership your entire career. So would you say that working leadership on something like as you're still in college would be beneficial, even if you're going into like a more technical position, or should I focus more on doing kind of technical work if that's I'm not aiming to go for some sort of management or leadership in my career?
I think you need to do both. And one, the leadership will come naturally. Where you're at right now, influence leadership is the hardest leadership because you're not controlling resources or somebody's performance review. You're getting things done by learning how to collaborate with people on a technical matter. So to me, it doubles down, but that collaboration, that influence leadership is a skill that will never go to waste for you.
Yeah, let me just say the most important class that I took at university was student government. It wasn't a class. I got no credit for it, right? And yeah, I took, machine design and strength of materials and all those good mechanical engineering courses, and that's all good and the foundation of what we do. But when you want to organize people to achieve a goal, try running a volunteer organization. Because it's just what Jim said. How do you motivate people when you don't really have a hammer, when you don't have a carrot? All you can do is motivate people that way. So I would say it's very important. And while you're taking your technical classes, the classes I wish I had taken when I was an undergraduate, psychology, how do people work, sociology, how do they get along? Some of those classes, work those in. They're right up there with, heat transfer or something like thermodynamics. Lord knows I took more math in college than I've ever seen after I graduated. So, yeah.
Well, I think we're at time.
Can I ask one thing, Jim?
Please.
I would. Had a great question in the student discussion. Could all the students that are here, not just the ones that I had the pleasure to talk to, could all of you stand up for a second? The question I got along the lines, what are my hopes for them? And there's a lot of students here. It's awesome. I encourage all of you to find one of these students when we leave here and tell them what your hope for them is, because we have had a great pleasure to work in these careers, those of us that are doing it today, and this is their dream. Tell them what your hopes are, what you want to do to support them, because whatever is happening in the next 5, 10, 20, 25 years is going to be because of them. So thank you all for being here, and please share that idea with them. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate it. So I'm just going to make some closing remarks here, just kind of formalities. But thank you very much once again to L3 Harris for your sponsorship of this session and being such a strong sponsor of the event. And thank you again to all of our other sponsors as well: Aerospace Corporation, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Amentum, KBR, SpaceX, University of Alabama in Huntsville, Barrios, Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, Leidos, and Teledyne Brown Engineering. Thank you also again very much to everybody at NASA Marshall. We couldn't do it without a lot of your help, the National Space Club of Huntsville, and of course UAH. Speaking of volunteers, I don't wield a big hammer, but they do a ton of work for us. So all of these folks listed up here, especially Bobby and Julia. Julia, are you here? She's not here right now, but thank you very much to them chairing our planning committee, and then everybody on that list. They put in a lot of time and effort in putting this together. And with that, we will see you next year, about same bat time, same bat channel. So thank you very much for being here. Take care. Bye-bye.